Welcome, everyone. My name is Robin Elander, Executive Director for the Downtown Santa Barbara organization. Welcome to our next Downtown Spotlight interview series. Today, we have Tyler Hayden, who is going to be our host and interviewing our fabulous guests here who are doing some serious moving and shaking in downtown Santa Barbara. I will do a proper introduction of Tyler. Tyler is the senior editor at The Independent, and he has been with Independent for about 11 years. He and his team at The Independent have received multiple awards for his in-depth coverage of major local and national issues. So thank you so much for hosting us and this beautiful collaboration celebrating our downtown business community. And I will let you take it away, Tyler.
All right, thanks very much. Well, I want to introduce our two guests today. We got Barrett Reed, who's one of the founding partners of the Miramar Group, and now a city planning commissioner. And as Robin said, serious mover and shaker, doer, thinker. And then we have Jason Harris, who is the city's, I want to make sure I get your title correct, Economic Development Director, who joined us. When did you come on board, Jason? Not that long ago.
March 30th. So
there we go.
2 weeks into the pandemic. Yeah.
Right when everything.
Perfect timing, right?
Yeah, really good, really good. So we're really lucky to have you guys because you are very in the trenches with the first triage, and now hopefully we're getting past that point, revitalization of State Street, its next chapter in life. But before we get too far into the future, I want to back up a little bit and talk about your guys' histories, because the topic of today is new ideas for State Street. And both of you are ideas guys. I mean, what you do is think creatively, think outside the box, but also pragmatically about how to get things done. So I'm just curious, even though you're in different positions, different fields, you got to work kind of that part of the brain. So Barrett, I want to start with you. You and the Miramar Group, you guys are responsible for the water line down in the Funk Zone, Kim's service department on State Street, and then Los Arcos, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. And those were all really interesting, innovative, successful ideas. And I just want people to hear a little bit about your journey to get those places up and running, how you got the idea to do a shared space model, if you had tried it anywhere else before, and this is the one that worked, or is this your first shot out of the gate? Catch us up a little bit on how you got that going.
Sure. And yeah, thanks, Tyler, for having us. It's a
pleasure.
Fun thing you're doing. So with the water line, I actually had a car business. I originally leased one of those three properties. This was 15 years ago. And I was restoring classic cars out of the space. And at that point, the Funk Zone was dead. I'm born and raised here, so on occasion we'd go to concerts at the old Coach House, which is actually adjacent to our property now. But there wasn't anything happening there. But for me, growing up, it was such a cool area, and I was so lucky to be able to lease space when rents were cheap and run a business out of there. So I really got to know the immediate neighborhood and could recognize its potential in a way. So I had an opportunity years later to buy 3 adjoining parcels, including the one I had our cars in. And they were, they're pretty large spaces. And I thought of a destination, a space, what got me started thinking about it, that I would want to come back to, a destination that others would want to come to and come back to, and what could accomplish that. Creating this destination by attracting diverse set of people to hopefully a diverse set of authentic uses. And by doing that, I my hope would be that it would create energy, excitement, interaction. And the name came from kind of that cheesy aphorism, high tide raises all boats.
Hmm.
And I thought if we could have collective success with concepts that I would enjoy going to, I think that collective success could be greater than the sum of the individual parts, the individual businesses and operations. And so I knew from other businesses that like these were properties that I wanted to hold the rest of my life. So my long-term success and the tenants' long-term success was very much aligned. And I wanted to create spaces for customers, I being one of them, where it'd be around for a while. And so just being really careful in the process of selecting those operators, think about compatibility, strong business fundamentals, but also like, if you get two similar businesses in there, are they going to fiercely compete against each other? Or are they going to complement each other? And then we were just extremely hands-on. So, you know, from the purchase to the concept, design, planning, permitting, construction management, leasing, the ongoing property management, we're involved in all of that. And I think what translated to tenant success, at least initially, was those experiences, I think, translated to success for them. It wasn't a siloed process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, often it's, you know, I have this broker representing me in a purchase. I use this broker to do leasing. I hire this architect. I'm not really involved. And it's just kind of a pass off.
Mm-hmm.
And people can get lost in that. And, but ultimately, like why I think it succeeded is and other projects have succeeded. And I think this translates even onto State Street. Like people have an appetite for the authentic. And that area, State Street, Funkstone's authentic, State Street's authentic. I think it's easy not to see that so clearly anymore, but it has a rich, authentic history. And real estate in Santa Barbara, and some of the most dilapidated real estate is so real and authentic. Mm-hmm. And I love taking advantage of those neglected spaces and seeing them as opportunities. And I think that's a big part of why customers want to be in that space. You know, we try to remove the pretense. Yeah. And we don't get too ahead of ourselves in the design. It just, let's embrace it for what it is.
Well,
Santa Barbara a lot of that.
Right. It's interesting. You did what we are sort of now hearing from consultants and people who are making suggestions of how to revitalize downtown is make it fun, attractive, a draw for locals. So you're a local guy who made it something, like you said, that you would enjoy, that you would want to come back to. And it's interesting. You're kind of proving them right, and you're a little bit ahead of the game in that respect, because that's the refrain that we keep hearing. You know, don't try to pull tourists in and only market to them. Don't try to bring people who don't live here in to live here. Like, make it for the people who already live here, and then they will come, kind of thing. Yeah. It's an interesting, though also kind of intuitive equation.
It is intuitive.
Yeah. So Jason, I want to just hear a little bit about your creative idea process as well, because you came from Phoenix and you were in Santa Monica as well, and Santa Monica that just comes up quite a bit here in Santa Barbara as a good example of how to enrich a commercial core, how to to deal with some of the challenges of homelessness, of changing retail landscapes. So talk to us just a little bit about how, like, what kind of ideas, big or small, like even like small things that you were proud of, but or conceptual things that you oversaw at either one of those places, and how did you get there? How did you move them along?
Yeah, no, great questions. Thanks, and I'd agree with Barrett. Thank you for having us today.
Of course.
Great opportunity to engage in the community dialogue. So yeah, I think you're right. The Santa Monica, there's a lot of similarities, right? The population size is similar. The aspect of being a coastal city with kind of high regulations, really endeared to the local community. A lot of protection of the architectural or physical character. Doesn't obviously has the rich history of architecture like Santa Barbara does. But maybe where there's substantive differences, the business community has a longer and maybe a more robust role in engagement. So there's 4 business improvement districts in Santa Monica. 3 of those are business improvement districts like the downtown Santa Barbara organization, where it's the businesses assessing themselves for marketing and promotion. That's Main Street, Montana Avenue, Pico Boulevard. But then the downtown Santa Monica is both a business district and a property-based district, and it happens to be the largest in the state. It has a $9 million dollar operating budget, 34 staff, very robust. And so I think the lessons learned, some of the aspects and functions that I was engaged in there was kind of leveraging and partnering kind of city with businesses through the business improvement organizations, how to leverage that opportunity for the business to help promote, activate their areas. Maybe the difference is Santa Monica is part of Los Angeles County, largest county in the United States, 10 million people, very competitive region. So you're competing against the Grove and just a number of other commercial districts throughout the greater LA area. Santa Barbara's a little bit, more standalone and unique, but nonetheless still needing to facilitate and engage, how to facilitate, bring residents, engage patrons, customers, to kind of piggyback on Barrett's comments, be authentic, right? Because if people see through kind of the phony, the facade of effort, and really creating kind of authentic experiences. And that's the exciting thing about Santa Barbara. It has so rich of culture, such a creative class of residents such as yourselves that are so engaged in the community. So it's really just tapping into that potential and engaging and really bringing the community together. So we're living through probably the toughest times that any of us have lived through in our lives, both economically and business environment, socially restricted. But at the same time, we're kind of using this as an opportunity to accelerate and facilitate change and turn the page. So I think there's some real unique opportunities. It's an exciting time, as difficult as it is.
Yeah. You brought up the concept of business improvement districts, and that's been a conversation that's been batted around here for a while, for downtown. It's got its pros and cons. It's got its supporters and critics. And just want to reiterate to people out there, we're just talking here. We're not definitely not setting policy or going down one path or another. We're just brainstorming ideas. So Jason, do you think, in your opinion, that there's maybe room for a business improvement district here, or multiple, as you said there were in Santa Monica? What do you think on that point?
I think certainly there is. The community has, downtown. It's obviously it's the commercial core of the city. It's commercial heart. We've got the greatest conglomerate of business activity, density of activity. But there's other rich commercial corridors to the city, and it's important that those are all equally vibrant and sustainable. They don't have the abundance of retail space that downtown does, so it doesn't have that same level of dynamic of just the challenges of retail, the Amazon effect, eating in or eroding storefront retail experiences. But Coast Village Road areas is expressed interest for a number of years of organizing themselves. And you could see over time, I always, communicate and speak with businesses, and when there's a conglomeration of businesses, to start with the baby steps, right? Form merchant associations, organize themselves, because it doesn't necessarily need to be and organized as a business organization or even a property organization, but there is power in numbers, right? And there is benefit of having a collective voice and a common message of how they brand and market an area. It's instead of just one off. And we're on, we're in the funk zone or the Milpas. Funk zone's a great example, right? So that's very organic. It happened organically. It wasn't a master plan by any one developer or even the city of creating a specific area plan. But in itself, it slowly has defined itself, right? And so we all refer to it as the funk zone. There are some various, businesses that have kind of, clamped onto that, and wine tours in the funk zone, or kind of utilizing that. And so I think just as we think about downtown, I kind of think of the whole corridor, right, from the waterfront all the way up to kind of the beginning of Midtown State Street. It's all one just large commercial area that has really distinct areas, right? At the waterfront, the funk zone, lower State Street, mid State Street, kind of retail experience, the art culture section of State Street. So it's obviously we have as Barrett's reference, really authentic spaces, rich culture, history, incredible architecture and buildings throughout, and then amazing neighborhoods. So it's, as we all know, it's Santa Barbara is just abundance of riches, both natural amenities and incredible creative, engaged residents and professionals. And so I think it's really crafting and tailoring all of that. So we all help each other, right? That, local government's helping business. We're turning the page there because obviously there's been, criticism just on the permitting process, et cetera. So we're making effort there to improve that. So just can facilitate business investment, but just the small things, right? It's just how we facilitate events, how we market and communicate ourselves, and facilitate, resident engagement coming into experience these places. I'm always amazed when I come across residents that are like, I don't come to downtown. I'm like, really? And they're like, oh no, it's too difficult to park. Like, really? There's 12 parking structures and parking lots all through the downtown. How can it be difficult? But they're interesting enough. There was a very kind of similar dynamic, and so I'm like, I never go downtown. It's too touristy. It's too difficult to get to. It's like, it's 3 square miles, the whole city. It's like, how is that difficult? But I get it. People get into their habits and their mind frames, and so I think what we're wanting to do is be attentive to the resident concerns and needs, and fine tune and help communicate, right? So if signage, it is hard to find parking structures, right? There's no signage. We have a very restrictive sign code in Santa Barbara. So it's like, okay, maybe there's ways that we can help communicate where the parking is. And right now we have a unique dilemma where we've created a great environment with parklets, obviously the closure of State Street, but we need to now enhance and support the retailers because they're kind of been drowned out a little bit with that. Yeah. I think a broad, visual impairment of just, some relied on that, drive-by traffic, some just, need that exposure on the street. So we're constantly adjusting.
Jumping back to the business improvement district concept, and it's a little in the weeds, and we'll jump back out, but it's an important one, and it's an ongoing, as I said, conversation. Barrett, how do you feel about that idea? And for the people who are watching who might not know what a business improvement district is, and Jason, you can help me if I get this wrong a little bit. It's a mechanism by which merchants band together and basically tax themselves to make improvements and market and promote their business district. Is that okay? So Barrett, how do you feel about that? Do you think there's space for one or more of those here in Santa Barbara?
So Tyler, there actually is one.
There is one.
Oh, okay.
Well, technically there's 2, but they all operate as one under the Downtown Santa Barbara organization. There's two, the Old Town Business and District. And
yes, sorry, thank you for clarifying. Right, okay.
So what we have, and I serve on the board that Robin is the executive director of Downtown Santa Barbara. So I'm not sure how much I can speak to this because it's an internal conversation. And I just got to be careful with policy stuff, but we have a business improvement district that is assessed to the businesses.
Right.
And a consideration would be a more comprehensive improvement district that could provide more resources to the community, to public spaces, and that would be a shift to a property assessment rather than business assessment. And so I think all the options are on the table, and it's exciting. And to Jason's point, I think it's helpful to consider the downtown as inclusive of other areas that we traditionally haven't included, such as the funk zone, the waterfront, and kind of thinking about a larger central business district, so to speak. So it's a complex process, but it's a worthwhile one to explore, and I think we're moving in that direction. So
Cool.
a lot of benefit that could come from it, certainly.
Thank you for clarifying. That's a super important distinction. All right, well, let's jump to ideas and what you guys are chewing on and thinking on at the moment. And I'm going to ask you to be as specific as possible. Anything in your hip pockets that you're thinking about, you're working on. Barrett, any projects on the horizon, if it's not premature to discuss them now, or anything coming in or out of Los Arcos, or any of your other projects? Talk to us about fresh stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, just the title of this, New Ideas in Old Town, the new and the old, the combination of the two, I think they work well together. They have to be considered as assets to each other. And Los Arcos is a building I purchased a few years ago. It's on the corner of Anacapa and Ortega, and it was for 40 years. It sat vacant in its majority. This is now a designated structure of merit, so quite intimidating to take on something that has had literally no maintenance for decades upon decades upon decades, and to try to bring life back to it. But it's kind of the common thread between all our pursuits. And Los Arcos was a historical name for the property. We brought that name back, and I'm actually talking to you from that building. Our offices are upstairs, and we're fully leased. It's exciting. We finished leasing everything during COVID, and I think with a commitment to buying and holding, it lends itself to some important elements. Like, I can justify a substantial investment in a property or a project up front because I'm going to have it for a long, long time, and not too dissimilar to the city. I mean, the city, more than anyone, is holding on to stuff that will outlast all of our lives and can make that investment, and is in the process of making that investment. Los Arcos, we decided to take what was 6 individual spaces since it was built in the mid-1920s and rip them all out and open the whole thing up. So we've got, roughly 4,000 feet on the ground floor now. That is one space, and one of our anchor tenants is Low Pigeon. It's a small coffee business in town. I don't know if I should have said that or not. I don't think I have their permission. But
you're awesome, though. I'll give them a plug. I mean, I've been in their place on Haley Street, and they're great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
They had a small existing business, kind of unlike Pete Burnham at Llamadog, but I got to know these guys for a while before putting a deal together with them. And Pete Burnham at Llamadog, at our place in the funk zone, has done incredible things, and the community's responded so well to it. And Matt Pigeon of Low Pigeon is very similar. These are very creative, visionary business owners who can stick to a simple plan and execute it so well. And there's so many of those people in Santa Barbara, and they're not given the opportunity. So when I look at State Street and the surrounding areas, like we didn't just stick to the funk zone. Prior to COVID, State Street was in a bad place, but it kind of dead or dying. And in the same way we saw the opportunity in the funk zone, it was so obvious on State Street. It's incredible. It's incredible. But back to that, like the individual parts versus the cohesive whole. What we have seen in the city doing this incredible job in pivoting and closing state and allowing the businesses to push out is the walls came down. One of the issues was you have all these really awesome businesses, but they don't relate to each other. Even though they're adjacent to one another, there's no connection, there's no interaction, there's no energy between the two. And I think Rob Dayton touched on it when you guys were chatting a few weeks ago. It's like you thrive off of that, running into people on an unscheduled visit, and it brings life to an area. It brings energy. That's what people want. And I don't think that's going to change now. It's going to look different in its permanent form, but this horrible pandemic has really presented some incredible opportunities. And I have to hand it to some people who get a lot of negative press, like Paul Casey being one of them. That man is an incredible leader. And he took a risk and he pushed this thing and he got it done. And so did Jason, and our city deserves our support. And there are things that are broken that can always be fixed, but all departments of our city deserve our respect. And they are here to help this town and help their applicants. They're not trying to get in the way of that. And our high standards should be celebrated, not condemned. And so I'm just very proud to be a member of this community, and like let's give all the credit to our leaders during this time, myself not included.
Jason, I want to get to you, but I want to follow up on something you said, Barrett. You mentioned Low Pigeon and these brilliant visionary people in town who have an idea and they're just going for it, but they might not have the opportunity, as you put it. What do you mean by that? Like what pieces or piece is missing for them that we as a community can help them find or generate, or city leaders can move in that direction to help them get? What is that missing opportunity point? That it's not always there, obviously. We have success stories all over the place, but there's enough stories of angst as well to I think ask that question.
Like since the focus is on State Street, let's take the majority of those properties being, not extremely large, but not extremely small. It's kind of this awkward in between, like call it like the 5,000 foot problem. Mm-hmm. It's not viable for a lot of businesses. So we have ownership and long-term ownership on State Street and in Santa Barbara in commercial real estate. These are people who have a very low basis in their property. If it's vacant and they're not getting income, it doesn't hurt them all that much. And there's not a whole lot of incentive to invest a ton of money to make a space or spaces more relevant and more desirable. So for these businesses that have incredible operational capacity and vision, it's very expensive. And so for us to see this across the board in our downtown, we're going to need to see property owners step up and be willing to make that investment alongside potential tenants. And that's not it's not an easy task. And how can the city incentivize that? You know, I don't know. I think it's kind of it's a private market sort of thing. They can only incentivize it so much, and they shouldn't be blamed for all the passivity. But it's a complicated question and complicated answer.
Yeah, to that point, and Jason, I'll ask you first, that, you know, the city has come up with a lot of incentive ideas. There's the AUD program, there's inclusion. I mean, we're talking about housing sort of on that point, but, you know, there are incentives for businesses as well. Do you think there's any room, and this is another controversial point, we don't have to dwell on it, for a city, a community to monitor and de-incentivize people leaving their spaces vacant for too long? And, you know, I don't even want to call it a fine or whatever it is, because that just almost sounds too scary. But is that something that could be looked at here or should be looked at here? I mean, I'm thinking of, you know, off the top of my head, I can name a half dozen places that have been blacked out way before COVID, right? You know, there's the Left at Albuquerque building. There's the Safina Brothers spot, which should be the entrance to State Street. So what, if anything, can be done on that point?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's called a vacancy tax. It was being discussed in Santa Monica, similar issues, very similar issues and conditions, actually probably not as severe, because not majority of the city is in a historic district that adds complication to, you know, the regulatory framework, as it were. But ultimately, those are difficult. I mean, when you look at the communities that have adopted those, progressive, albeit, how effective, question mark. Ultimately, it's a vote of the people. That's a tax ultimately that would be required. And there's some other vehicles. I think the better approach ultimately is to lead with inducement. Establish some carrots. Cities in the process of that, we're facilitating improvements, streamlining, the regulatory processes to kind of reduce the red tape, and we'll still maintain the standards on, architectural and design review, but what can we do to facilitate the permitting process? And then to a degree, I think we're bringing other stakeholders into the mix to add voices to the conversation. Barrett really eloquently stated the conundrum, right? We've got some passive / absentee, out of state, family trust, ownership interests that, they've just been getting the retail rent. But the paradigm's changed, right? The nature of retail, the amount of retail that we have, the environment on retail is changing. And so I think that the standard status quo is not quite there. And then over time, I think that, the equation of, well, just maintain this property and pay minimal property tax because of Proposition 13. And, when they can start evaluating and seeing where properties are starting to develop housing, right? Which is in the paradigm, and I think Santa Barbara will follow this. Housing in Santa Monica was the highest and best use for return on investment. And so you were seeing many properties move towards housing for that purpose, right? Property owners are ultimately, business people, and they're looking for the greatest return on investment. And so I think over time, what we'll see is projects successfully developed, housing projects that will in turn, create, new customers, a new environment. And, that success just kind of echoing, Barrett's reference of kind of the tide will rise all boats scenario, right? And so, yeah, we'll always have a little bit of those standouts, but, I think there's proactive measures that we can take. And then ultimately, we're going to be in there facilitating and opening opportunities on a wide range. And so I think kind of this touch upon the other aspects, which is, hopefully over time we'll start to see a diversification of the commercial market, right? It's not just the standard retail environment that will be introducing new and different types of uses, other commercial uses. And broadening the mix of activity that kind of will support a wider range. So for those properties that may not look at a substantive, refill and fill type of development scenario, where at least there'll be a greater diversification of activity than just standard kind of consumer retail mix, and that's just going to be healthy for the downtown to have a greater diversification of commercial activity.
All right. And as far as new ideas,
when you're ready.
Sorry?
Do have a couple questions too when you're ready.
Let's do those, and I'll come back to me.
Okay, great. So I think Jason was starting to get into it, but talking about, what the biggest barrier is for increasing retail, and a question mark, is it rent? Is that something you started to kind of get into that? And then also another question is, have either of you, our guests here, participated or seen the results of the AIA charrette, and what are your reaction to what came out of the recent efforts?
I'll take a first pass. I'm interested in Barrett's, response. Really, two totally different types of questions. I'll take the softball, easier one initially, just the AIA. So this is kind of, kind of set the table, as it were. So as we all know, the American Institutes of Architects, Santa Barbara chapter of architects, very engaged. Back to that reference of creative capital in this community, and engaged professionals giving back. Over this latter part of the summer, they brought together 160 professionals to do this kind of design exercise, studying the various concepts on downtown, and it was really exciting to see just the creativity that they identified. But pre that design exercise, they did a very kind of binary survey of cars, yes or no, evaluating the kind of temporary State Street condition that went into effect. And what was amazing, at least that jumped out at me on the demographic analysis of that, 4,700 respondents, which was a really healthy survey pool, but 25% of that, it was like evenly distributed. 25% of the respondents were over 65 years old. A really healthy cross section. 98% of the respondents were locals, if not residents of Santa Barbara, kind of adjacent communities. So really kind of healthy, broad response from the community, and really highly engaged in wanting to see downtown change, and really accepting the closure of State Street. I'll just touch upon, I want to really interested in hearing Barrett's thoughts on these, of just the change of retail. Obviously rents are a major deterrent, but probably equally challenging is just echoing the comment he made earlier, is just very large retail spaces, right? These were buildings built decades ago that weren't, today if you were building a commercial building and dividing your ground floor retail space, it would be 800,000, 1,200 square feet, in that range, not 3,000, 5,000 square feet. So, and you wouldn't have the depth, right, of 100 plus feet of depth. I mean, it just does not work for traditional retail, right? That wants to be a rectangle that runs along the street frontage, not a rectangle that dips back across the street. And so, I think those two aspects are really compounding. And then it's just, as we all know, that the reference point is we have an overabundance of retail in general. And so, there's more retail space than there is demand and interest and need. Until we kind of contract and add to the pool and diversify the mix, it's, I think we're going to have a constant struggle. And obviously pandemic's only, exacerbating the conditions.
I've got one other question that's come in, a couple questions that are coming in actually over text, people watching and checking in. Another question for Jason. How realistic do you feel like is closing 9 blocks of State Street based on your experience in different areas, and how successfully do you think that we can do that potentially, since it's being discussed, looked at, considered? How are your thoughts? And I'm curious about what Barrett has to say on that subject as well. Thank you.
Yeah, well, as we all know, we're in the process of gathering the community's feedback. So we've been doing these kind of focus group conversations with various commissions, committees, stakeholder organizations. We're finalizing a resident survey that will be coming out here in the next few weeks. And we'll have intercept surveys, a variation of that resident survey for ambassadors on State Street to collect this feedback. Ultimately, we're going to gather all the information, all the feedback we're hearing from folks, and develop these thematic areas of input. And it's already clearly emerging. The ideas we're hearing, right? We need State Street, we need downtown to be a space for all people, all incomes, all age groups, so diversity. There needs to be things for families and children's, and retain the nightlife, but add to it, et cetera, et cetera. The council's going to, craft a vision statement. They'll adopt that, and then that vision statement will help answer these kind of fundamental questions of close State Street or not, and then the more complex set of questions of close State Street, but under what parameters? And I think that's actually the question that's being asked here, and it's a loaded question. It's a difficult question because what comes to mind when I think of these spaces, it becomes a public space, right? It's a street today. It's for vehicular traffic. It's been closed. Now it's a pedestrian promenade and outdoor dining. And what are the uses that are going to be facilitated, and how is the space designed, and then how ultimately is the space managed? And when I evaluate and think about and look at downtown Santa Barbara, it's like we've got an amazing amount of public spaces. Actually, one could argue we have so many public spaces, and we're building more. Library Plaza, we have adjacent parks, we have Plaza de la Guerra that we're looking to envision, and we're going to add to that. I don't even know what the square footage of X amount of each block of State Street. What does that envision? And obviously, there's finer points of, is it a transportation corridor? Is it bikes and other wheeled devices? But I think that is a fundamental question: is whatever amount of space that is created, how is it going to be effectively managed? And we have a substantive challenge with those experiencing homelessness that we need to provide resources to, but effectively have space that's safe and perceived safe, and it's enjoyable for the cross section of the community and families and seniors, all throughout the day and time. And so I think as we go about thinking about the design and the function and the space, I think we'll need to be equally developing what is the space and how we're managing. And Robin and I have been speaking of the exciting opportunities when we're out of COVID and we can come back to public gathering and having events. Well, we're going to have a new public event space that the city doesn't have any equivocal representation of. Obviously, we have amazing parks, we've got the waterfront, but here you have a mix of public open space that's in an urban environment that's a mix with adjacent commercial and future adjacent residences. So you can just imagine the possibilities of having everything from local school groups doing musical performance to live theater to festivals to just all sorts of pop-up activities. So we need a space that's flexible to facilitate that. But when we don't have activities and we don't have these functions, is it also still enjoyable? Is it still safe? It's well lit. There's amenities in place. We're hearing a constant, request of, we need seating. We want people, racks lit, passive spaces to relax. Well, we had seating at one point. We had to remove it because it was creating areas of nuisance, right, and areas of congregation of activities that we did not want in the downtown environment. And so that's the balance. And then those are the issues that we'll need to work through. And I think those will be one of the primary reasons why we'll be looking for property assessment districts where everyone is helping support the management of that space. And we have professional space-based management, because it's really critical. There's no reason to create a space if you can't effectively manage it.
A major work in progress. Thank you for that really detailed description. Tyler, I'll let you continue the conversation.
Barrett, were you going to weigh in on the first question? God, I'm actually spacing on what it was. Well, okay, forget that. What do you think about the 9 blocks of State Street being closed? What do you think of that midterm? Do you see that being a potentially permanent thing? What's your crystal ball telling you?
Again, I don't know how much I should speak to, because I don't want to put myself in a conflict where then I'm recused from participating.
I hear you.
I want to serve this community the best I can. So I think the decisions that have been made are good decisions, and I think we have a process set forward here that's going to result in something that we're all proud of. That's going to bring benefit not only to restaurants and bars, but I think it will bring a resurgence to a reinvented retail. Tyler, I think you published an article that actually Robin and Bob Stout sent around on the State Street food court.
Mhm.
And I think it's going to be a pretty tough interim period for retail, you know, and we have to come up with solutions on the fly to support them, to keep them going. But there will be hope. It just, the ultimate solution is years out, which is a permanent, the potential for a permanent redevelopment project of the public spaces. And that will bring more balance between food and beverage and retail. Right now, F&B dominates State Street. And I don't think it was, you know, an attempt to pick winners and create losers, but it's unfortunate. I mean, my heart breaks for some of these businesses that are struggling because they aren't seen, and they're just in the distant background. So I don't know what the immediate solutions are, but I know when we have more permanent, reinvented public amenities, outdoor space, we have more exploratory districts, we have more housing. We are going to be able to people are going to be able to represent retail in a way that will be invigorating. And I think we will see success in retail. Retail is not dead, and it will not die. It will not die. It will be different and in a lot of ways better. But for us in this community, specifically State Street and the off streets, it's going to be hard for a few years. And not like it hasn't been hard already. So I hope we can support them in meaningful ways. But it's brutal. It's just brutal.
It is a very difficult time, and we do have some strategies to support retailers and are growing more. So this is going to be a conversation that we want to continue to have with our retailers to make sure that we can support them in all the ways that they need it right now.
Well, and I think Robin, you guys and the downtown organization deserve credit for the Thursday night markets you got going on that just started. And yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer. I was down in Ventura the other day and was kind of exploring their downtown and their patio setup, and same thing, same issue. And I got to imagine this is a problem up and down the state, and maybe even all over the country. Jason, do you in your position, do you compare notes and trade ideas with other men and women in your position in other communities to kind of talk about what's working, what's not, what's worth trying, what's to stay away from?
Yeah, definitely. Both in the regards of, to your point, comparing notes with other professionals in other cities, and then I'm actively engaged in a number of professional organizations that are working on this. There's a really good one, International Downtown Association, that oversees these business improvement districts and always looking at best practices, and obviously webinars are the new thing, right? And so no one's going to conferences. And interesting enough, that the original inspiration and in the drafting of the guidelines, et cetera, that is State Street, I picked up from Tampa. Tampa, Florida, of all places. They were one of the first cities I came across in the United States back in March that had closed some of their commercial corridors, allow outdoor dining. I thought it was kind of interesting of all places, but we're fortunate that our environment can allow outdoor activities. To Barrett's point, not all business, is equivocal of, consumer goods, retail, home furnishings, clothing. They can't necessarily easily pick up their store and distribute it outdoors. It's a different space they have to manage. They, they have to deal with the inclement weather, et cetera. And so to Robin's point, we're looking at all the best practice of what we can do. One of those aspects is just, addressing, and, we'll be working through this, is we have really restrictive, ordinances or restrictive sign codes. And one of those is wayfinding, enhanced signage, just, directories, but where we can easily, and I think the other sea change that this community has had is we have a city council that is more receptive and responsive. Not to say that any past councils weren't, but the environment has changed, obviously very dramatic. And this council that's seated now, they were elected prior to the pandemic, and they were highly motivated and interesting in facilitating change and supporting businesses. And so I think we have all the right ingredients in place, and obviously we're a little bit of house on fire right now, like just trying to keep the house from burning down. And so we're triaging and we're working through the issues, supporting restaurants that were just dying left and right, that it could only operate without takeout delivery. That just doesn't work for so many. And restaurants hire a lot of people, and so part of this isn't just a direct one-on-one support to a business. It's all the people that are employed by that business. Food service establishments hire more per employees than any other type of business operation. So part of this was also just stemming the time of trying to reduce the level of unemployment that we were experiencing. We had huge numbers, and we brought that back in. And so we're just trying to maintain the status quo and keep going, businesses going. And this is a critical time going forward, the holiday season for retailers. And so, just as always, and I'm so grateful and thankful, this community, just the wealth of creative capital of, residents. And I just get creative, thoughtful suggestions all the time from residents. It's just so, everybody else at least wants to, throw rocks at the glass house, but folks saying, have you thought of this? You thought of that? And so looking for best practice, creative ideas, solutions. We're just all open ears, doing everything we can, meeting with businesses, hearing their ideas. So we're all at it, looking at everything we can do.
All right. Well, you guys, I think I covered everything I was going to ask, unless there's any points we haven't talked about that you wanted to bring up.
I think the only thing I would just add to the conversation is we're beyond just these interventions, right? Really trying to reinvent State Street, trying to support and retailers and kind of reconfigure the temporary conditions that we've made, look at the permanent conditions. I think longer term is, how to build on to what we have. And so obviously housing is a big component of that. But I think in addition to that is I see an opportunity to build on the creative capital. We have a number of startup tech firms that are here, some with great level of success, Sonos, and Appfolio and others. So, looking for those next rounds and looking to support, just professional business and creating opportunities for residents to have, higher income opportunities in the community is amazing. And then this really exciting expansion of, this area is blessed with just a number of higher education institutions. And so I don't know if anyone noticed, but Westmont just recently purchased a building, and thank you to that foundation, to the Parker Foundation, to facilitate that. So again, we're not seeing the full amplitude of everything that's happening. It's kind of behind the scenes and underground, just because so many activities are restricted under COVID. But I think seeing expansion of UCSB into downtown over time, Santa Barbara College, there's, UC, the Cal State Channel Islands has been kicking tires for quite some time. So imagine if we have a robust academic environment, and those uses typically are kind of in the evening, afternoon, kind of augment the downtown workforce. So you just imagine a reinvigorated downtown where you've got residents, you've got higher education students, interconnecting our transportation. All of a sudden we have, probably the best small city in the world. We have the best small city in so many aspects, right? The arts and culture and the architects, but you can add the vibrancy of all these other activities. I mean, it will be unparalleled. And with, visionary property owner developers like Barrett Reed and his colleagues, the folks that are going to facilitate that change.
I think the education component is really enticing and really interesting and exciting. And as you mentioned, the Westmont was a big deal. It kind of flew under the radar, but I hope more people see that as a sign of progress and hope, and people are wanting to come downtown for these different uses and ways of living and working downtown. And it was interesting during the charrette when the teams were thinking about what they could do with different properties and different buildings. You know, if they had their druthers, a lot of them went the education route. They're talking about like industrial design schools, or they're talking even about like preschools and kindergarten and daycare for people who live and work downtown. So it'll be exciting to see how that progresses. And before I let you guys go, actually, Barrett, because you've talked about repurposing these old spaces, kind of breathing new life into these authentic, traditional Santa Barbara properties. Where, if you want to name specific properties, you can, or maybe areas. Where else do you see that being a possibility? Whether they're parking lots, public or private, that have been sitting there, and that's like prime land, either for commercial purposes or residential. Are you looking at that kind of stuff, and are people checking those things out as well?
Yeah, I'm trying to pursue it all right now, Tyler. And the things I can talk about, the things I'm most proud of are taking treasures of this city, historical resources, which our city does the best job in the world of preserving. And for instance, I'm in the middle of development on a small hotel on State Street, and it's in another designated structure of merit. And so we're building a building on top of that structure of merit. And HLC gets a bad rep a lot of the time, and I've never had a poor experience with them. If you truly engage with them and demonstrate your passion and your ideas, they're a huge asset to the finished project. We got project design approval for that. So the blending of the old with the new is fabulous. And I think we absolutely need to create and innovate, develop, redevelop with an emphasis on embracing like the historical appeal of our town. And I believe the end result will be projects that are much more dynamic than if you didn't take that tack. So we have the best city in the world. Santa Barbara is the greatest city in the world. And for many, many reasons. I mean, we face south when everyone else faces west. We look out at some of the most beautiful islands with a half mile back. We have mountains that go up over 4,000 feet. We have some of the best wine ever. We have Spanish and Hispanic history that is just unbelievable. We have the best food, the best weather, the best architecture. We have everything. Like things are so pessimistic, and I understand circumstances for most of us, or many of us, are very difficult, but at least we can be encouraged by the absolute beauty, the glory of this town. And it's worth investing in. It is worth investing in. And we are on a path to do that. We have great housing incentives. And the work that Jason is doing and many of our city leaders are doing are facilitating that investment in the greatest city in the world. And that will never change. It is incredible. So lots of hope.
Man, Visit Santa Barbara should hire you and just cut you loose.
Yes, it just has so much business recruitment going on with Barrett. What a great business leader you are for our community, and Jason too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, as the sun is setting on me, I think we should set the sun on this conversation. And thank you guys again very much for joining us. A lot of good stuff came out of it, and we'll be seeing each other soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Robin.
Before we end, I just want to really quickly plug our next week's speakers. So next Thursday on the 19th, we're going to have some design insight from the past and present. Our board president, Bob Stout, with the downtown organization, is going to be in conversation with Lynn Tamisian from the La Arcata space, and Don Sherry with Sherry and Associate Architects, who has designed many different local spaces. And tonight, that's going to be at 3 next Thursday, the 19th. And this, every Thursday, don't forget, this evening also, our State Street Promenade Market is happening until 7:30. And it's a great place to check out local goods, artisans, all kinds of interesting things in a socially distant way that feels good. Lots of interesting lights downtown. So come on out and we'll see you next time. Thank you, gentlemen, for a great conversation. And to our community, be part of these ongoing conversations. This is how community thrives, through conversations like this that you interact with and you participate in. So join us and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. Great job, everybody.